Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I'm joined by Sara Connell. She's the founder of the Thought Leader Academy, and she's a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and transformational coach that helps coaches, writers, and entrepreneurs become best-selling authors and in-demand thought leaders. Sara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So, Sara, you've been featured in Oprah Winfrey Show, Good Morning America, Forbes, so all over the place. And really, I'd love to know, how did you get into this line of work where you're helping other people become more visible? What made you want to go do that? And how did you find so much success in this space?
Well, it's so funny because certainly it wasn't in career day growing up that there was an option even for coaching, if you're as old as I am, right? And or certainly not thought leader or, author was something I did always want to be. And I was the kid, I loved reading books and I loved journaling and all the things, but I understood by watching movies and reading books that the way you knew you were allowed to be a writer was that a teacher would take you aside and tell you you're special, because that's what happened in all the movies and the books about kids that became writers. And then when that didn't happen, I didn't know I did this, but internally, subconsciously, I said, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, I'm not allowed because I didn't get that benediction, that, that whatever. And I don't know if anyone listening has ever realized you've done this, that you gave the power of someone else to decide if you're worthy of a dream. And it's so backwards, because our desire and our calling to something is the sign, in my opinion. Like, after coaching people for 20 years and being on this journey, that is the sign that you're good enough, that you're capable, that you're worthy, that you're allowed. The fact that you have, because not everyone has our desires. They really don't. We think, oh, everyone wants to. No, they don't. My sister's a medical doctor, and she would rather do anything than write a book. I mean, she thinks it sounds horrible. And I think taking a medical board exam sounds just absolutely traumatic. And so it's so good that we're doing what we're here to do. So that's part. So I had this idea that that's how it had to happen. It didn't happen. And so I went and took a job after university at an advertising agency. So I thought it's good, creative adjacent, whatever. And unfortunately, it was at the height of the Me Too era. And it was really abusive and traumatic and all kinds of awful things for not just me. Obviously, many was the whole culture of that type of behavior. And I was feeling like I was spiraling into a really dangerous place, mental health wise, physical health wise. I developed a really serious eating disorder kind of to cope with the trauma of this environment. And I was traveling back from Boston to Chicago, where I lived, one day, and they're calling my flight at Logan Airport, and I don't have any time, but I see a bookstore. And all I wanted was just like books. Again, that's like church to me. It's just like, oh, books are my guides, my friends, my, escape, whatever. So I randomly grabbed a book. It was called Holy Hunger. I'd never heard of the author. She's not famous, a woman named Margaret Bullitt Jonas. I read the whole book that night on the plane, in the taxi, stayed up all night, crying, ugly crying. I'm holding this like snotted, wet book at the end of the night. And this woman's story was very different than mine, but she did share, how she got into this really dangerous physical and mental health space like I had with this eating disorder. And she shared how she got well. And at the end of that book, I said, that's it. Even if I'm on the street, even if because I was a single woman supporting myself, I was 30 years old. And I said, even if I'm on the street and never do anything with I'm leaving this job and I'm going to go get help. I'm going to get well. And so I credit that book as saving my life.
Wow.
Saved my life. And so what happened then is that thankfully, I did get better, and I decided, well, if this is my bottom anyway, I'm just going to write, because it's what I always wanted to do. And so I had the gift, not overnight, but of working my way up to getting an agent and getting on Oprah and the New York Times, and these amazing things with my first book got to happen. And I made a vow that I was going to spend the rest of my life paying that gift forward, like that I was going to be the space where other incredible experts, entrepreneurs, executives, people that that are working in their ecosystem and doing this amazing work get to be in the airport bookstore on someone's darkest day through a book or on a stage or on the TEDx red carpet or whatever it is. That was what I was going to devote the rest of my life to. And that's what I've done. And it's been the most incredible privilege and honor of my life.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that some of us think, like you said, that somebody comes and tells you, yes, you should be an author. You are a great. And I think that there's a lot of people that are waiting for that permission, or that, that somebody else saying, yeah, you're good enough to do this, which holds people back, because I I don't think that there's really anybody out there who's necessarily going to know better than you what it is that you should be doing or what you want to do.
Yep.
But I think that there is kind of this illusion that, like, writing a book or something, like, you have to be at a certain level. You have to have certain, I know I thought you had to have certain credentials or designations or all of these things before it
Mhm.
would be okay for people to
Yeah.
listen to your opinion
Right.
or to take you seriously.
Right.
And so now that there's so many platforms, there's so many ways for people to, to express themselves. I'm just curious, what do you think, for somebody listening who maybe feels like they have a story inside or a book inside them, or they have, things that they've learned that they'd like to share, or maybe they just want to entertain. What are some of your thoughts for people who really just have no idea where you would even start for
Yes.
that?
Yes. So it's funny, the New York Times came out with this article a number of years ago that said 200 million people in America alone say, I want to write a book. So it is a thing that, like, a lot of people feel like, oh, that would be so cool. And there's a difference to me between those of us that, the people that are at the, wine party being like, oh, I'd love to write a book, versus people that know they have a book in them. Like,
Mhm.
and all of you listening know, like, Missy, you knew, some part of you knew. It's like, there's a book I'm meant to write, or there's a book in me. So if you're in that camp, right? Anyone who has I know there's a book in me, or people keep saying you should write a book about that, and that excites you, not like my sister, makes you
Yeah.
feel like you want to run for the
Not if it
hills.
hurts, no.
Right. But if it excites you, then it's like, well, what do we do with that? Right. Because what book and what kind of book? And so I have a whole methodology, because this is what stops so many of us, because we get overwhelmed at even the idea of what would the book be, what would go in it, then let alone who reads it, how do we get it published, how do we make money from, all those
Yeah.
questions emerge before we've left the starting gate, right? Like we usually talk ourselves out of doing it. So what I love to do, and maybe we could just do this live. This takes like 2 minutes, but a really kind of neat exercise is to take 5 minutes, and any of you can, pause the recording of this and do it, and just write down if you were going to do a book. So you play the game. We're very neuroscience based at our coaching company. So it's a meta question in your brain. And you say, if I were going to do a book, what would I do a book about? And you just write down a memoir about my family's immigration to Canada, a cookbook about this, a book about my business, a sci-fi romance, I don't know, whatever. You just write all the ideas. It's called the whiteboard. Just put them all down, piece of paper, type it out. And then the magic question for me, and when I'm coaching people, is, what is your number one priority in the next 12 months? From like a professional perspective. So if that is revenue generation, for example, like you want to scale your business and increase sales, you would look at all the book ideas you just wrote down, and you'd ask yourself, which of these, based on what I know, would most likely result in more revenue generation? Because your passion project about your family,
Yeah.
and that's unless you do genealogy or, remember,
Yeah.
like, is probably not a lead generator, a client attractor, a magnet. There's sort of 7 doors that books open, revenue generation, strategic partnerships, speaking engagements, attracting dream clients, book sales. And there's these doors that writing a book opens for us as experts and business people. So which of those books lines up with your top priority? And it usually becomes very, very clear which one of those is the front runner, right? Then at that point, okay, then how do I construct a book, outline a book? I mean, we could talk all day, and I won't go into all of that nuance, but even just getting your idea, and then what we want to do is feed it through this Venn diagram, which basically is like, okay, our passion, like, I really want to write this book. Yay, that needs to be there, because passion's contagious in a good way. But then how is it helping someone solve a problem or achieve a dream? It's like the next sort of circle in that Venn diagram, because any great book, talk, YouTube video, course, business
Mhm.
offer is going to help people overcome a challenge or achieve a dream in some way, a piece of those things. And then the piece that gets ignored so much is the third circle in the Venn diagram, which is what's urgent about this now? Because that's what's going to make your book viral. That's going to
Yeah.
make your book something that's going to get you on the media, the someone that's going to get you on all the podcasts, something that like now we all have evergreen topics, like making money, being a good parent, helping people with their health. Like
Mhm.
hopefully we're all going to, we are as humans going to care about these things all the time. But there's usually something going on in the world that makes it extra important for what we're all focusing on now.
Mhm.
Like, why is when I wrote The Science of Getting Rich for Women a couple years ago, it was because I read the study that women had lost $800 billion in the pandemic. And I was so outraged and upset. It's like, oh, already we have pay gaps and
Mhm.
confidence gaps, and now we're taking this
Yeah.
hit. And that book was, my friend said, what are you going to do about it? You're sitting here bitching about it. Like, what are you actually going to do? And I said, oh, okay.
Yes.
So could I be a tiny piece of a women's economic comeback? And that was, and so why was that urgent and relevant now for women to wealth build? Well, it's always important, I
Mhm.
believe. And it was extra important because it took an $800 billion global hit.
Mhm.
So that Venn diagram helps us. So that's what lands books in the bestseller zone. Because bestseller is just simply enough people. It's volume. It's just that many
Yeah.
people saying, we got to do this as the book club. You got to read this. We've all had people come at us with, you got to read this book. Um, and so that's where I would start with everybody. What are all the ideas? What's your most important objective for the year?
Yeah.
Which one lines up, and then put it through that litmus test of those three circles to ensure that's how you're going to set your book up for success from the beginning.
I love that because I think there are certain things that maybe we're only focused on one of those circles.
Mm.
Like maybe we're only thinking about like our goal is to get more clients or our goal is to get there, but we're not really thinking about like, well, what do I like? We're just looking at what has gotten other people on TV, what has gotten other people here, and kind of backing into, well, then I guess I'll just write about that, or I can't write about that because somebody already did. And I think a lot of times our brains are trying to keep us small and exactly where we are. So I think if you're putting these out on paper, some people might get to that step of writing out all those things that they're passionate about and then be like, no one's going to read this. No, 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 no. So I love that you're pushing it back to next step to kind of keep that
Yeah.
going because we can be very critical. And I think that there's
Oh,
something about writing a book that is very like the book you read in I'm sure that that author that wrote the book that you read in the airport probably hesitated about telling that story a
for sure.
lot
For sure.
because it's so
Here's what we
personal.
say. It's so personal. What will my family think? What will my, boyfriend from third grade that sees
Yeah,
this on Facebook, all this
yeah,
stuff comes up. Then imposter syndrome. I'm not a celebrity
not a doctor.
I don't have a million
Mhm.
initials after my name.
Yeah.
I didn't go to college. I mean, people have all this stuff and we talk ourselves out. So we're not the best judge, and that's why if you think of the book as a love letter
Mhm.
to your person that you're here to serve, what is the dream you're helping them achieve or the challenge you're helping them overcome? Then it's not about, am I worthy? Am I capable? Did my eighth grade English teacher
Mhm.
say I'm a good writer? Who cares?
Yeah.
Not important, right?
Yeah. And it's just a tricky thing. But I do think that's a massive number of people that have expressed that goal in this country. So I think that's such a great way to start to think about it. And also, yes, if you're passionate about something and you just want to write it and you don't care about being on a best, like you just want to get that story out, fantastic. But you have to really do make sure that everything aligns because it is a big effort. It is a big undertaking and there's expenses and costs involved too, just like anything else that you want to do. So I'm curious, you help, you know, you help people get to that next level. You help them get high profile speaking gigs. You help them get, on big stages. I'm curious though, from the person that starts out to that, what's
Yeah.
the biggest mindset shift that you see
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
those people? Because I feel like they're no different than people listening here who've not gotten there yet or are thinking about it. But what are you seeing change
Yeah.
with
It's
that
such a
process?
great question because we look at the Brene Browns and the
Mm-hmm.
Mel Robbins
Yeah.
and the Oprahs and the Marie
Mm-hmm.
Forleos and Gabby Bernstein and whoever it is that you, Glennon Doyle,
Mm-hmm.
these mega thought leaders that have inspired so many and sold millions of books, Elizabeth Gilbert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like the Grand Canyon sized chasm between, right, like where we are and someone at that level. And yet what everyone forgets. So a mindset shift too that I'll offer. One is to focus on the climb versus comparing yourself to the summit. So I really like this helped me a ton and still does, because we often see the summit, which is global thought leader. You're known by one name, Brene,
Mm-hmm.
Oprah,
Yeah.
Gabby, right? Mel. And that's iconic status that those thought leaders have achieved. So we're seeing the summit icon, right? But every one of them made different base camps,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what I really like doing is saying, oh, let's reverse engineer what were some of those earlier base camps, because it just seems like such a swing and so impossible to go from like, I'm me with 5 people on social media to that. And we're not going to make that in one jump, right? So what I love doing is reading some of the early stories of some of these people. You know, Brene Brown was told no by every publisher, self-published her book and printed it herself and sold it out of the back of her car
Mm-hmm.
at lectures. I mean, this is not a glamorous beginning, right? It's not. And so I think that the first mindset shift is to focus on the early moves of these, and you can find them out by listening. These people all have podcasts, they've all written books, they share their story. So this isn't hard to find. Hell, now we talk chat GPT, I'm sure. Tell me the moves Mel Robbins made when she was unknown. What were the first 5 things? You pick your person, you know, whoever your person is that you admire and want to emulate in your career. Then the other mindset shift is, and I really believe this is true, that your desire to write that book or speak on that stage is not random. It's not something that just happened by coincidence. There is a call and response. So to start thinking about the people that need the message only you can share. That woman, Margaret Bullitt Jonas, is not famous. She's not a household name. And because she wrote her story, I didn't die. I mean, that's how serious I take that. That's the power. This is just some person who like decided I'm going to share this story that's vulnerable and whatever. And she's saved lives. I'm sure it wasn't just mine. So what's so cool about it is to think about the service piece. I think that's the mindset shift. If you have the calling, it's the sign that people, maybe a handful of people, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions, are calling forth that message. And the whole other people have written about it. Yeah, that's called validation of concept.
Yeah.
That's what I like to this is what I like to do with myself and my clients. Like, if people have written a bunch of books on your topic, that means good. That means there's an appetite. And I bet we have all had an experience where, you know, someone told, oh, you got to read this, and we read it and just nothing. It's just, we're cold. And then you have someone who essentially says the same thing in another book, and oh my gosh, like lightning bolts and rain. So just to give a concrete example of this, because it really helped me get over that. It was a huge, we call them gremlins, you know, inner critic that I had. Because like, there's so many books. What am I going to possibly add? So there was a book called A Course in Miracles, if people have heard of it, that came out, I don't know, like the 70s or 80s. Essentially, it's a very dense, like spiritual text, right? That book came out, made a huge impact. Like, there were people all over the world that still use it. And then years later, Marianne Williamson comes along and she discovers this book, and she writes a book about her experience of the book, A Course in Miracles. It's called A Return to Love. It spent, I think, years on the New York Times bestseller list. It was a massive book. Okay. So that's someone writing about a book that already exists and their experience of that book. And then you think that move could not be done again. And then a number of years later, Gabby Bernstein writes a book about her experience of the Course in Miracles called May Cause Miracles. So now we have another book that is on the New York Times bestseller list for, I'm sure, over a year. All about a book that already was written about and had already been, I mean, this is like, these are New York Times bestsellers selling millions of copies and making those women absolute, again, like iconic status as thought leaders, writing a book about another book. So it is okay. Yeah. As long as you're bringing your own. I don't really like the original Course in Miracles. I don't I didn't resonate with it, but I
Mhm.
really, really liked Gabby Bernstein's book, May Cause Miracles. I really got a lot out of that book. I'm glad she didn't talk herself out just because Marianne Williamson had
Already
already
did it.
written it
Yeah.
and the Course of Miracles already existed. She did it anyway. And
I'm
it's,
curious though, with that whole line of,
yeah,
writing this book about, and then even now with, with Chat GPT. I mean, I wrote my book without it.
yeah.
So
And you
I'm
can't,
curious.
by the way, just so anyone listening, you cannot actually publish a book that ChatGPT wrote. You have to
Yeah.
sign legal waivers that any publisher or articles, you actually, it's not, you
Hmm.
will not, they have screening
Okay.
software. So I
Yeah.
just want everyone to understand, like, I don't, I like strategizing. What are some
Hmm.
ideas for emails that I can write?
Yeah.
I use ChatGPT for all kinds. Send me a pep talk. I feel down
Hmm.
today. I love it. Okay. I don't let it write a word of any of my
Yeah.
actual books and articles. That's
Because you
just
have to have your take, right? There has to be something authentic in yours and genuine because I do feel like, yes, there is this potential to kind of cling, like get on a trend or do something that you're seeing
sure.
out there. And so I think when we think about, Marianne Williamson, Gabby Bernstein, like they're taking that in like their personal experience is what resonates with a different
Exactly.
reader, not just the first original.
Correct.
So I think that that's something that maybe a lot of people who are talking themselves out of certain things or books, somebody already did this. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
like, is it too close to what somebody else already
Right.
has done? But we're like, that's that part that has to be that authentic piece that can't be copied. It can't
Correct.
be your story. If
Your
it's yours.
story, your experiences, but I also would take it a step further. I think
Mhm.
for those of us that want to be in the thought leader
Yeah.
space, it's actually um it is your personal stories that will
Mhm.
differentiate it, of course, but it's also bringing something new to the conversation. In a Return to Love and in May Cause Miracles, and though just to use that example because it was so starkly like
Mhm.
linear,
Yeah.
taking the original work. But those authors brought new concepts, they brought new techniques,
Mhm.
they taught new ways of connecting with miracles and if they just did a book about I did the Course in Miracles and here are my thoughts. I mean that could be a YouTube video, not a book.
Mhm.
But they brought something new. They evolved the movement.
Yeah.
And that is what we're really going for in a thought leader book.
I want to talk about the term thought leader for a
Hmm.
moment. I think it might be, maybe something that people don't like anymore, or they think about LinkedIn's little crazy little cartoon that says thought leader, and it doesn't seem like serious. It's kind of like a term that I think has some credibility and some issues. What are your thoughts? Because I do feel like there's a genuine need for thought leadership in a lot of
Yeah.
different areas of so many different areas in the work that people do in parenting and health and finance, all over the place. But what are your thoughts on the word itself and what's happening with it?
Oh yeah. Well, this is of course since I have a company called Thought
Hmm.
Leader Media and Thought Leader Cat, it's very much I'm in heated debates, I
Yeah.
would say, with many different, people in the industry about this, and we all have our own definitions.
Mhm.
So for instance, one colleague of mine who he says a person should never call themselves a thought leader. Someone else needs to refer to you as a thought leader, which I feel is a very patriarchal idea, and back
Yeah.
to that whole thing of like other people getting to decide. So that
Yeah.
one doesn't fit for me. Then someone else talked about, here's the criteria of a thought leader and, your influence. So
Mhm.
here's how I define it. I define thought leader as first and foremost that we must lead our own thoughts. And that's where you were talking about the inner voice.
Mhm.
Are we leading our own thoughts from a place of positivity, a place of innovation, a place of creativity, or are we in a loop
Yeah.
with our own kind of negative limiting thinking? That's already a piece of thought leadership in my opinion, because we need to empower and authorize ourselves to think differently, right? We're leading our own thoughts first. Then we've got something cool to say, to and share with other people. I think this is where the AI discussion is so important. If someone is not willing to do original thinking, then to me, that is someone is not choosing to be a thought leader. It's no judgment. It's just like that is not thought leadership to pull something. The AI at this stage can only draw from what's already been created. And leadership, right? You're
Mhm.
leading something new and different, in my opinion. So it's leading our own thoughts. in positive, life affirming, creative, expanding ways, and then bringing something new to the conversation and being willing to do the deeper thinking work, right? Like Einstein would have his daydream time, and people talk about white space time, and we're horrible at this in our culture right now. Absolutely the worst, because we're, addicted to our phones, and we're, whatever. So the real danger, if you're outsourcing your critical thinking and creative thinking to AI, is that very quickly all that will be pulling, it's all going to, just be a very common denominator kind of thing. So I think that's someone who's opting out of thought leadership. If you're opting into thought leadership, you're digging deep and it's messy. You might have whole blocks of time where you feel like, I just sat there and explored something and it didn't go anywhere. Great. Congratulations. That's thought, you're willing to bring something completely unique in your point of view and a new way. So you think about, Marie Kondo sparking joy, right? There's a million books on organization.
Yeah.
Million books, but that created a movement, right? The 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell, like this is thought leadership. People are, and in many cases, they were pulling from, like Malcolm Gladwell pulls from academic studies, but he's willing to go and dig through these. Believe me, I'm writing a new book right now, and just the level of pain that it takes to get to the actual study, because you're getting abstracts online and then having to pay. I mean, it's like, oh my God, because I'm doing a lot of peer reviewed, research to back up the stuff in the new book. And so it's a thing. He's willing to do that work for us and then bring us these cool nuggets and these paradigms. So to me, that's thought leadership. You're bringing something new, a cool twist, your take on something that's important to people, and you're leading with a life affirming, innovative, and it's going to become a absolute wheat from chaff next few years, because so many people will just opt for convenience because it is easier.
Yeah.
It's absolutely easier. They did a study at MIT recently, and they gave 3 sets of kids getting ready to apply to colleges. And they took one group and said, here's the essay topic. They're just in a room free writing the essay. The second group could use Google search to, find data or back up their points, just internet search. And the third group could use AI if they wanted to write some or all of the essays. So the first group writes the essay, the second group uses Google, whatever. The third group, every single one of them opted to have AI write the essay for them. And they sucked. Right? Because even though they were well written, and even though they gave it good prompts, and even though they did all the things, it was, and the uncanny, creepy part of the study is that they were all almost identical. Like they all ended up kind of saying the same things. Well, that's what right now, at least, that's what the AI can do. And so, but the problem is even less that the essay wasn't great. It was that everyone opted for the easy way out.
Yeah. And if all of them had the same option, how many more would have?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it does.
If they let all the kids,
All of them
3
do it,
groups, said, hey, you can choose on your own with Google or AI, and because who wants to write a college essay? It's a pain in the butt. No one enjoys that. But if we atrophy, it's a use it or lose it. And I think that's true for our creativity, which to me, thought leadership is creative thinking, whether you're in the sciences or you're in what's considered a more creative field. Everyone's creative, and creativity is needed in every field. And so that's kind of where I think it's going to be more important than ever for those who feel called to thought leadership and are willing to do the work to really watch what we're delegating, because there's a price. And I'm all for it. Look, I am on ChatGPT every day for multiple things, but it's, what are we delegating?
Yeah, no. And I think it's unfortunate that we do tend to be delegating the creative piece, the very, the interesting part. And I mean, if I could have it do like clean my house, all the things I don't want to do, like it's just unfortunate, because I'm seeing some people in creative fields feeling the kind of squeeze there as far as their jobs and things like that being replaced. And so it is kind of I think it's such an interesting topic. I think it's something I fear as a mom. Sometimes I'll tell my kids I want them to like create more than they're consuming, and like if it's drawing or doing something else, because it's so much easier to scroll. And so I think that's something that you kind of almost have to fight against. And I think there are people listening. I think there's people who have ideas that need to get out there. However that medium seems to be, whether it's books or or stages or anywhere else. But I wanted to talk because this is another part that AI can't do. But you talk in your work about storytelling
Yeah.
and how that's a really powerful business tool. And I think a lot of times when I started out, I didn't think people would necessarily want to hear my story. I thought my story would be kind of um, negative. First of all, like most of the financial advisors are like older white males, and like I did not have money, or come from money, and so I was like, okay, I have to try to be more like them in every way
Hmm.
possible, which would mean like not telling stories,
Yeah.
maybe learning how to golf, learning how
Right.
to, hold my liquor, all of those things that did
Yes.
not help me very
Totally.
much at all. And so, but I think that having a story is something that is so helpful, but it can be really scary. So how do
Yeah.
you help people like learn
Mhm.
how to tell a story well and also how to not be afraid to share it?
This is such an important and awesome question, right? Because there's the craft of shaping a story
Mhm.
and sharing it. And then there's the courage to tell the story in the first
Yeah.
place. And even so, you're talking about the really important piece. So, again, I think we can answer this similarly to when we talked about the book,
Hmm.
because for me, the only thing that will give me the courage is to be of service to someone else. If it's just for me, there's no way I'm doing it, right? It's too big a risk. It's too uncomfortable. The potential for criticism. We're scared of visibility and judgment, and for good reason. We see people get attacked.
Hmm.
Maybe we've been attacked in the past. I call it business PTSD.
Yeah.
We might have had those,
Mhm.
visibility PTSD, that kind of thing. So I think the first piece is to think about, if you like, who needs to hear your story for you, Misty. I don't know if this is true, but I would imagine my friends that are in the financial space getting to see other women who didn't come from money,
Mhm.
who aren't male, who don't want to go play golf
Mhm.
necessarily unless that's what they love. They don't want to play the boys club game and go drink whiskey and smoke cigar,
Mhm.
whatever, just to be cliched. Although in my advertising agency, that's 100% was definitely
Yeah.
the culture, and worse, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So having a woman show up and say, I'm a powerful, effective, top world class financial advisor, and I look like this and I come from this. I'm guessing there are hundreds of thousands of young girls and women around the world that would be so empowered hearing that story. And yet it feels so scary because then all the guys might say,
Mhm.
shut up, or we don't want to hear from
Right.
you, or that's not. I don't know if you follow Cody Sanchez, but her
Yeah.
stories about working at like
Mhm.
Goldman Sachs, wherever she was, cracked me up all the time because she
Yeah.
talks about, like, can you imagine, like, they get me, I'm like, woo, and just
Yeah.
and so it is uncomfortable to be different and be a
Yeah.
disruptor in that way, even by your own presence and
Mhm.
not fitting in. So I think that the courage for me at least always comes from, that woman who wrote the book in the bookstore. It's
Mhm.
like, who needs to hear this story
Yeah.
and can identify, because there is research. I mean, I'm a science-backed girl,
Mhm.
so there is research. People will not take a risk to achieve something unless they see people who look like them, who come from where they've come from,
Mhm.
who have similarities to them. It is proven in schools. That's why diversity is so important in
Mhm.
leadership and in companies. It is so important that we do share, especially the things we think,
Mhm.
are maybe the things we don't want to highlight, right? Like about our background or some kind of shame.
Yeah.
Those are usually the things that other people feel that
Mhm.
around and will absolutely set everybody free. And so I think part of it is just the who needs to hear this. How would I have felt if someone had been this person for
Mhm.
me, when I was younger? Well, how would that, for Misty, for you, like, if
Mhm.
if a woman who didn't come from money was talking about, being in the financial advising world, would that have been helpful?
Yeah, it's definitely. And I remember seeing like a story, I think it was about Susie Orman, about like how she
Yeah.
waited tables at one point and was like, kind of, and I can identify with that. I waited tables in Times
Yes.
Bar. I did these skills
Yeah.
that I felt like these are really helpful when it comes to talking to people
Yeah.
and really like, and yes, it's not like having an internship at Goldman Sachs. However, like
Hmm.
I can talk to anybody.
And do you see the video that we would all click on if you're like, how what I learned as a bartender has helped me more than what
It's
my internship at Goldman
true.
Sachs? Like,
And
I
I
would click on that video. Everyone would watch that.
And I remember like she's on stage talking about retirement to all these people, everyone's listening, getting information about trust, all this important information. But I was like, how did she get there? And it did require doing some background research because I didn't know how to go, how to get from here to there, but somebody else had done it. And so instead of thinking like it's impossible, it's like, what did she, you just get curious sometimes. What
Yes.
did she do?
Yes.
Okay, this is what she did. This is what didn't work out. This is what she did then. This marriage didn't work out. All these things didn't work out. And people are sharing, like you said earlier. It's not like all this information is hidden anymore. Like
That's right.
everybody's kind of an open book going on these, interviews. It's not just like one night on, Jay Leno and that's it. And then the movie's out or the book's out. Like they're everywhere. People are everywhere. And
We have
so
access to all of it. It is
homework
the
can find
best, like
you.
to find the whole success leaves
Yeah.
clues
Hmm.
technique, which I love. And I love that, Missy, you did the digging and like, what were Sue Orsman's
Yeah.
moves? And so here's another piece. If people just want a financial motivation, because we're talking about, I love this because
Yeah.
we get to talk about money here. So here's the deal. Um, for a long time, this is just the way I kind of look at the marketplace,
Mhm.
of buyers, of people investing in coaches or mentors or programs or whatever it is. So for a long time, we were in like a results-based economy, right? It's just sort of what's the thing that I want to learn how to do or the goal I want to achieve, and I'll
Mhm.
just take the course, right? And then we were in like the Simon Sinek era of his TED talk about
Mhm.
the people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so there was sort of this like mission element and
Mhm.
and all of that. And now we're in, people are calling it a trust recession, which I think is accurate, and we're in a more mature online market. And we are now, if Simon Sinek was doing that, if someone asked me to give a TED talk on like what's needed now, what's motivating buyers, I believe it's a who economy. It's a trust economy, which means this is why story is so important. I'm tying it back to that because the store people now don't necessarily only buy what you do or why you do it. They buy who they are going to be in relationship with, even in a book, even in a low ticket thing, even in certainly in then a mentorship or coaching or something like that. So that the only way someone can know who we are is really through our stories, because otherwise it's like, okay, I went to Northwestern, I learned this, you went to where it's like, okay, but
Yeah.
that doesn't tell me anything about who you are. It tells me
Right. That's like the
credentials you
online
have.
bio
Yeah.
where,
It's like,
okay, you've got
okay,
a degree. Like you've
but
meet the minimum qualifications. Yes.
stories about your values, your judgments,
Mhm.
your pet peeves, your passions, your
Mhm.
obsessions, your unique way of looking that you're a human being. And you mentioned you're a mother, I'm a mother,
Mhm.
it's like, um, that's the stuff that is moving people to make an investment right now in 2025. And I think that will continue for some time. And so the story becomes everything.
Yeah. What happens when the story, and I've seen this before when I've been to some conferences or some
Mm.
places where I hear somebody speaking and it feels like a little too emotional, a little
Yeah.
too fresh versus helpful to me, where there's like some discomfort, maybe. How do you balance that strategic side for an entrepreneur trying to share their story versus somebody
Yes.
who's really like maybe still going through it
Yeah.
and just wants to share their frustrations with their ex or their pain from this
Yeah.
to a point where it feels awkward? How do you help people kind of balance that
Oh,
line?
we do a lot of work on this in thought leader media, because here's the thing, again, back to service, it's all about your audience.
Mhm.
And so what probably happened there is someone had not done their work, they haven't processed, they don't have enough distance. So the idea is share your message, not your mess, is
Mm.
kind of an idea. And I
Mhm.
think that's a good litmus test
Yeah.
of, there's times when I'm still in something and I'm not in a place like write a talk about it
Mhm.
or write a book about it. I don't mean we have to be fully healed and in some kind of
Yeah.
perfectionism around things. But I think so. I was at an event this year and someone did this, what you're talking about. And I did not, I did not purchase and take a
Mm.
next step.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why,
Yeah.
is because it felt like the mess
Mm.
versus the message. And there's nothing against being in the middle, like taking someone on a
Yeah.
journey is very different than the mess. But I think checking our intentions as well, and how much of our own inner work have we done around a particular topic, right? If it is still so highly charged, that we're, and I have cried on stage, like
Mhm.
sometimes sharing something, like I have had emotion, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. But there's a difference between like I'm in it raw, eating
Yeah.
me up, and I'm not, I don't have, also, here's a great question to ask ourselves. Have I gleaned the nugget
Yeah.
and the gift from this yet?
Mhm.
If it's more about I'm in the rage,
Mhm.
like a good rant can be fun for a video, but if we were talking about a stage presentation, like this
Mhm.
person, they we're
Yeah.
both talking about different
Mhm.
people, but that we witnessed this year, I don't recommend it. I don't, first of all, it will repel buyers if you're looking to attract, if it's something you're selling at some point.
Mhm.
And I also don't know that it's self-loving.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is
Mhm.
where sometimes I think people get into, I'm being real, I'm
Mhm.
being authentic, and it is.
Yeah.
But we've got to understand the medium. That's for the
Mhm.
therapist's office, your group of friends, whatever it might be, your coach, not necessarily for the stage and the book until you are enough on the other side of something to, or at least have distance within to be witnessing
Mhm.
and pulling something in the journey. We can share journey stories are great,
Yeah.
but mess.
Yeah. Journal when you're in the mess.
Yes.
Go back
Yes.
to it.
I journal
Pull from
every
it.
day.
But
Let it
yeah,
out.
maybe
Let it
not.
rip.
Yeah. And then you can kind of go back and say, "Oh, what do I want to keep? What do I want to leave
Yeah.
there and never
Yeah.
touch again?"
That's it. That's
I
it.
think,
You'll be glad your future self.
yeah.
James Clear always says, every action we take is a vote for our future
Yeah.
self. I think the future self will be happy that you decided to work through that a little
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
I think so too. So, I feel like we could continue talking, but I want to find out how do you help people? Tell me more about the Thought Leadership Academy. Who's it for? Um,
Yeah.
and a little bit more about what, kind of where you meet people, what
Yeah.
they're, where they're at in their process and, how you can help them with these dreams if this is a dream of theirs.
Absolutely. So what I like to think about is in the realm of thought leadership, right? I like thinking about three core components:
Mhm.
write, speak, scale. And we could say write, speak, sell as well, right? So what we love to do, as I said, back to the bookstore in the Boston airport, my mission in life is to make sure that any individual who has a methodology, a paradigm shift, the thought leadership, the idea, the story, that they know more people than their ecosystem
Mhm.
currently, knows about, needs to get that message out in the world. Then my mission is to make sure that you do that, whether that's through writing a book, whether that's through speaking on stages, TEDx,
Mhm.
a YouTube channel. The medium is whatever any individual wants it to be and feels excited. Most people that I work with are in all of the above, right? It's
Right.
like all those. So my job and our team's job is to draw forth the movement that you're here to lead. And that movement then get invited into that movement through a book and through
Mhm.
speaking and through content creation. And that you are now visible at, I don't even say 10x, like 100x multiple. I meet so many incredible people that are doing such phenomenal work. And I think a fraction
Mhm.
of the people on this planet who know about them need, the people
Yeah.
that need to only know about them. So that's our job. So we help people basically say, okay, if you want to be the go-to person in your industry, or get more known as a industry leader and scale your business, how do we want to do that in a way that lights you up, Misty, that might be different than lights someone else up, but through the avenues of writing and speaking?
Mhm.
And then we look at monetizing the mission, right? And so people specifically work with us in terms of thought leadership on, we have a 90-day bestseller. So it's like, stop thinking about doing, 200 million people want to write the book. Let's get this done in 3 months. And
Mhm.
we have many, many, now, if you want to take 6 months, it's totally fine, right? It's not school with like strict, but we like the idea of that 90-day bestseller and using that whole system to reverse engineer, again, the right book for your desired outcomes. Because I've written the wrong book and then
Yep.
realized I did all that work and it didn't get me anything that I
Mhm.
wanted because I didn't reverse engineer it from the beginning. So we do that from the beginning in the 90-day bestseller. And then looking at our speaking strategies for, great, you have a book, you have that credibility and authority, because people do choose authors 80% more to speak on podcasts, in the media and stages than experts without a book. So it really is a door opener that way. And then what kind of speaking? Do you want a podcast tour? Do you want to go on stages? Do you like guest speaking in small groups. Like, what's your speaking vision, right? And so we empower that speaking vision. And then we made it fun. It's a club, the Monetize Your Book Club, because we don't want to feel hard and heavy. But then how does that thought leadership, your books and speaking, how does that continue to make you daily sales in your business? Because Misty, you've done it, I've done it. You do this book, and after the launch, you don't know what to do with it. There's no ROI. It's a real bummer. It's a real freaking bummer. And so we want to build books to make impact and income for the rest of your career. And so that's really our specialization. And we use brain science to do that identity, mindset, subconscious work to wire your brain for success as a thought leader, and then use writing, speaking, and scaling to really manifest your next level, right? Again, we have people doing extra 6 figures a year, 7 figures a year, and beyond, because again, money matters. Like, we want to have abundance for our families and our lives and the causes we care about. So I'm really obsessed with the monetization piece. And that's why we started the club, because it's just too often the story is I wrote the book and nothing happened.
Yeah. Nope. I think that that's definitely a familiar story. But there's certain people, like, I'm somebody who likes to set goals and check them off the list.
Yes.
However, there's certain things like writing a book or something like that. I do think that there is another business side of it that maybe isn't something that as you're writing the book. Or I think it's definitely a very important and helpful piece. And it is an investment. So I'm curious, would you be willing to share, like, how much of an investment would somebody in their business or in their life should be open to taking or expect if they're looking to add this to be, the way that they start to get more visibility for themselves in their career?
Absolutely. So the way we do it in our current, this is really like new in the way, because we've really been doing a lot of like talking to our clients and people who have books. So we're doing a new thing right now where, because it used to be in our programs, it was, $17,000 for a year and you have to do all these different components. So we've actually pulled them out just to let people know industry standard, because I've been researching this very deeply. So, our 90-day bestseller, where you get your private book coach and editor, you have your book fully edited, you have our whole system, just as an example, very robust sort of container. So that's like market value, like what people charge for that is 15,000 and up. So we're doing it right now, just like, because it's an insane year, 2025. If you're listening when this comes out, it's crazy. So we're doing it for people, just at least for right now, for 6,000. So that is like less than half of sort of and so you're going to pay typically more like 15 plus, but we're doing it and breaking it out for in our, world, right now for 6. And then the really important piece is the club, which then they come in, write their book in the 3 months or 6, and then they get a year in the Monetize Your Book Club. And that we're doing same thing. It's a $5,000 membership, and we're doing it for $997. So just under $1,000. So the idea is you invest, in our case, depending on who you work with. But if you're in our world, 6,000 on the book now, and then 1,000 essentially for the club. And the goal is that before the book's even published, you've made back that money, that $7,000, because we have our clients booking paid speaking engagements before the book's even done. Like, it's in publication. They say upcoming book, they can leverage that. That's what we teach. That's back to write, speak, scale. So my goal is always, when I invest in something, I want to make my money back immediately and then be in profit. And so our goal is actually, that's before the book's even launched, or people that come to us just for the club, $997 for the year. Then you just hit the ground running and start doing the strategies. And your goals, you should make the $1,000 back in the first month. And so my whole thing is, yes, there's an investment to all these, but how quickly am I not only, equalizing, neutralizing, zeroing the investment, but then where am I, and how quickly am I in profit? So our goal is 90 days. You're in, that's the goal, because then you have fun. Then it's just an asset that's making you money forever.
And also, like, for some of us out there, if it's just our book in our head and no one's telling us that it's due or this is the deadline, it could take 40 years.
Absolutely. You won't do it. And that's why we do this container.
It can take 90 days.
Right?
It can absolutely take 90 days. People think that it's crazy, but I think that time can collapse. There's so much you could get done. But I think a lot of times, if somebody else is going to talk to you, or your coach is going to talk to you about that chapter, or you're going to work through something together, things get done. I love it. And when people pay, they pay attention. So
Well, that's it. When
I
we
love
invest
it.
the money,
You have
it's
to.
like, well,
It's
okay,
happening.
now I really got a return on this. So we just
Yeah.
had someone enroll in the bundle,
Mhm.
like they just did the two together.
Yeah.
And she said, it's so great. She said, I've been wanting to do this for like 5 years,
Yeah.
but I know now, like I have to because I've paid the money.
Yeah.
And I also, though, didn't ever have a plan for how I could ROI.
Yeah.
That's what had kind of held her back. So now that she's like, now I know I have a year in the club when I finished in the 90 days, then she's like, but I also need to make good on that for myself.
Yeah.
Like I need to do
Yeah.
the work.
Yeah. And having that support and having other people around, I think it does help. And a lot of us entrepreneurs, a lot of us are very either, if we're working on a story that's just ours or we're self-employed, like we're kind of going about things on our own sometimes. So it does help to have those experts to pull in those, even if it's just people who also support what you're doing, because they might not be in the room next to you. They might not be, why are you telling this story? Why are you saying all
Yeah.
this stuff? Is this going to
Yeah.
embarrass me? Is this going to embarrass everybody?
Right.
They might not be the people who are pushing you forward, but somebody might find your book on a shelf someday and change their life. So, Sara, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. How can people find you if they want to learn
Yes,
more?
absolutely. DM me anytime. I'm so here. As you can tell, this is like my passion. So anyone at Sara Connell, and I'm without an H, so it's SaraConnell on Instagram is a great way. DM me there. And our YouTube channel is just at Thought Leader Media. So we have tons of resources, free trainings, the brain science stuff. You can access all of that there.
And can people find your book there as well?
Absolutely. All the books. Yep.
Yeah, find her book. I'm curious. I'm gonna have to grab a copy of your book because I did not know that's how much money women lost in the
Isn't
pandemic.
that horrifying?
That is
And
horrible.
it has the story of 25 other self-made women millionaires during the pandemic. So it's my system of how I went
Mhm.
from struggling to make 20K a year to making
Yep.
multiple seven figures a year, but then also 25 other stories because I wanted different voices,
Yeah.
people back to look different than me, different
Mhm.
backgrounds. Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you so much, Sara, for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're looking to pick up a copy of Demystifying Money or catch up on any old episodes of the podcast, please head over to mistylynch.com. I would love to hear more from you there and have you catch up on some episodes. This is such a great topic, and I want to see more writers. I want to see more authors. I want to see more original independent thought out there. You really don't know who's waiting to hear your story, and I think a lot of you have those stories in your life that can help others. Thank you for sharing your story today, Sara, and thank you all for listening. We'll talk again soon. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.